What's up, y'all? This is James Patrick from Slam Academy, and I want to take a few minutes to cover 3 critical techniques for the EQ8 in Ableton Live. I've got a session here where I recorded some of my Eurorack synth. Let's drop it in here at the first little beat here. So it's pretty sweet. Let's go ahead and loop that section. We'll Command L, and I think I want to solo this FM Perks bus. Let's listen to this by itself. This is the Humble Audio Quad Operator module. So nice. This is just a dry mono audio track. You can see it's not even stereo. We're going to do the 3 essential EQ8 tricks to make this thing loud and clear and as big as possible. So here we go. Starting off with an EQ8. Put this first in the chain, so if we have other effects in the chain, this is usually first, and you'll notice my default preset is expanded with the expansion here, so I can see a nice big view of our spectrum, and then my very first node is already defaulted to be a ×4 high pass filter. This is allowing the highs to pass, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snug this EQ8 up right up against the fundamental pitch. Now the fundamental pitch is the first big peak, and you can usually see a really similar looking peak about an octave apart, and that's double the frequency. It's always nice to know. You can look in the lower left here to see which frequency you're moused over, and you can visually see not only which frequency, but which note that is by looking in that same little readout. So let's listen one more time, and we're going to nudge our frequency up of our bass cut or our high pass filter right up against that fundamental. So now, like I said, you saw a peak up here at about 36 hertz. It's a D, and then another one at about 72 hertz. That's also a D. That's the nature of the natural harmonic series, and you're always going to have 2 peaks that are an octave apart right at the low end. So what that means is that, especially if you have another instrument in your arrangement or your ensemble that's really supposed to be handling the sub bass, which we do in this case, I can actually start pushing that fundamental down a little bit too. Once we get too far past that fundamental and start hitting that second peak, we'll really start to be sucking kind of the body of the sound out. So you got to do that to taste. But that's essentially the first EQ practice. Sometimes I'll have my second node, which I keep on as a low shelf as my default, and I'll just bring this down right below kind of the body of the kick drum, and I'll start pushing that down a little bit too. And again, remember keeping in mind what other sounds I have in my mix. You can see by turning these nodes off how much mud I just cut. Totally way more controlled, and every decibel that I cut, I'm able to buy back by then cranking up the makeup gain here to equal out my input strength. So if I cut, say, 6, 8 dB over here, I can go to this makeup gain and I can turn it back up to re-add it. And I'm watching to make sure I stay way clear of the reds, but look, I just bought myself back a bunch of nice, meaningful decibels and frequencies that I like. So that's the first EQ technique. Cut the bass as much as you can. Do that even on your bass tracks, even kick drums. Get that. Just keep an eye on where that fundamental is and get up right next to it. And especially with microphone recordings, or in this case, this again is a hardware synthesizer, there's going to be line noise, there's going to be crud in there, there's going to be stuff you don't want, especially in the low end. So let's trim a couple dB down here. That's going to buy us back magnitudes more volume and energy in where it matters, in the notes section here and in the textures area here. So let's go ahead and address a little more of those spectral content using the second of the 3 EQ techniques. This one addressing the mids and highs. This is called wringing it out, and this usually involves a narrow bell filter. So I go to the filter mode here, and I'm going to choose a bell, and to make it narrow, I'm going to usually take this Q and put it up somewhere around 3 or 4. Now watch, when I turn this on and boost it, it's kind of a narrow little boost. And this is an age-old technique I learned from my analog mix engineer mentors 20 plus years ago. I'm going to sweep this around until I hear frequencies that I don't like. And you can hear how that's ringing a D, right? That's the D, that's the note that my bass is playing. So this is a harmonic node. little bit of out of harmony there. You can hear each of these sounding like a note until we get up here, it starts sounding like texture. Those are hurting me right there. That's at 2K, 3K. So now I'm going to go ahead and trim those down. Now the general rule here is the farther you cut, the narrower you want to make your Q. Now luckily in Live 10 they give us this adaptive Q in the EQ8, and that's going to just ensure that the further we cut, the narrower it makes that Q. I'll go somewhere around in there. Let's try one more for fun. Now with this, I'm going to give it a little boost, pump that Q up to 3 or 4, and now to really hear what I'm scooping around and sweeping for, I can do another trick in the EQ8 by hitting the solo button here, and this will allow me to actually only hear what's passing through the node. Definitely some squawking going on right there. Let's mellow that out a touch too. Now notice I got to keep it a little wider because I didn't cut quite so far. This is called ringing it out, and each time you do this, you're buying back overall volume. You're giving us the ability to turn the track up louder and louder, because what happens when you listen to music really loud and it hurts, there's just certain frequencies that are poking up too loud. It's without jumpy peaks moving up and down. We're able to achieve a more well-balanced sound that's going to be less painful at high volumes. So let's try and re-add back some of that makeup gain that we attenuated now again with our gain here, watching our output gain and kind of comparing it to our input gain. I can definitely add a couple dB there. Now they're about the same height. Look, I just bought myself back 7 dB. Let's A/B that real quick. Wow, it's a lot more powerful. Let's take it out of solo and listen to that. So that's definitely more tasty for sure. So now to move on to the third technique. The third technique, unlike the first two that cut and attenuated frequencies, the third technique is a hyping technique, especially as it relates to the stereo field. I'm going to go ahead and grab my EQ8 again. This requires a separate instance of the EQ8. And what we're going to ask ourselves right away is, how big, as far as stereo content, is this sound really? And the way you can achieve that is by flipping your EQ into mid-side mode, and the mode here. And mid-side is going to give you two separate EQs. One for the mono content, meaning the frequencies that are identical on the left and right side, and one for the stereo content. And these are the side bands, in other words, the frequencies that are unique or different on the left and right sides. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go to the mono content. We're going to turn off that default high-pass filter because we already did that. And now we're going to go over to the side bands, and we're actually going to make sure that our low end is totally mono. So by getting rid of any sideband content below 100 hertz, we're ensuring that anything below 100 hertz in our mix is not stereo at all. And then we're going to find some frequencies to hype, to enhance that stereo image. Now before we do that, let's watch and let's see how much stereo information is in this sound. None. And remember, this is a mono track. So how do we normally add stereo image to things? The most classic way to do it with a synthesizer patch is with a little delay, or even better yet, a chorus. A chorus is a delay. It just is a tiny amount of time. And we can just even say we don't really even need any modulation at all and don't really need any feedback. Just have a little dry wet mix, and we're going to start to see a lot more information happening in the stereo field. I'll even open this filter up a little bit. Just by adding a tiny bit of modulation and a little feedback, I can be able to hear quite a bit more information and see more information on the sidebands as well. So now watch what happens when we scoop and boost. I'm feeling that for sure. Let's do another one. This is a bell way down low. Let's sweep around here. make this nice and narrow. Let's narrow that one up. I know we're boosting right around 2K. That's a sweet spot for like our snare drum, maybe. Snare drums can usually be pretty much closer to the middle of the mix. So because of that, let's go to the mono bands and let's head to that same exact frequency and trim it back a tiny bit. So now we've taken this EQ and we've added some stereo image by boosting and cutting. And now we can use our scale to decide if we want less of that or more of it. This is a really fun trick. You can even reverse it to try and push those same bands up the middle. Especially when wearing headphones, this can be super obvious, or if you're in a studio with a really nice stereo field. So look at this. This is 3 techniques we've rolled into one channel strip. So I'm going to shift click on them all and hit Command G, show the rack here, show the macros, and I'll just call this EQ sweetener. That's a nice little combo of devices. We can A/B the whole thing now. Way more interesting. So you can try the same technique on a lot of different sounds, but keep in mind that how you treat sounds as far as the harmonics that you boost or cut, as well as the stereo information and where you push it out to the sides or up the middle, is going to relate a lot to what kind of voices you're dealing with as far as what kind of instruments. If they're a lead voice, a leading tone, you probably want those sounds to be more up the middle and more kind of demanding attention and resonating in the main fundamental frequencies or keys of the song that you're working in. Whereas if it's a supporting sound, like a sound effect or a backing vocal even, or some percussion or one-shots, those kinds of things can generally be more pushed out to the sides, less mono information up the middle to make more space for the like lead vocal, the main drum beat, the main parts that are really going to carry the energy of the track. So keep in mind that relationship between supporting roles and lead roles as you decide where your frequencies go in the mix. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Again, I'm James Patrick with Slam Academy. Please come through and visit us at slamacademy.com anytime. We teach advanced electronic music classes in mixing and mastering, sound design, and more. So look forward to hearing from you.